Hello, everyone. Yeah, so it's kind of been a while, but I felt compelled to make a new podcast episode. So here I am. There's a lot that's been happening in the last couple of months. As many of you know, I just put out my new album, The Start of the Queen of Life. You should go listen to that. Go watch the videos, read the interviews, listen to the mixes, etc. There's a plethora of things that I've made for this rollout, and I'm really proud of this album. I'm really proud of myself, honestly, because of how much goddamn work that I've done over the past 12 months. Like, you guys, you wouldn't believe it. But that kind of brings me to what I want to talk about today. I feel like I'm still concretizing a lot of these ideas, and I was inspired by a conversation that I had with my friend the other day. So this might start off kind of rambly, but bear with me. But speaking of how much work I've done over the past 12 months, a big part of the reason why I've had to work so hard is because I haven't had a manager for over a year now. So I've been self-managing and kind of taking care of everything myself. I still have most of the rest of my team, of course, but I've been my own manager while also being the artist. And if you know anything about the music industry, you know that that's just like an incomprehensible amount of work. And mind you, it's not for lack of trying. I've been trying to find a new manager, but something crazy always happens and gets in the way. Like, you guys would be shocked if you knew everything. I've tried to hire someone a few times now, and it's insane how it just feels like it's been blocked every single time. Like, I've had so many meetings with so many different people, different companies, and it's either that it hasn't been the right fit or literally something crazy happens. So I've just decided that I'm taking it as a sign that this is my time to do this solo dolo, I guess. And in doing it solo, I feel like I've come to certain kind of fork in the road illuminations about music and art in general as an industry in the 2020s, like this part of the 21st century. And as I mentioned, like, I was having a conversation with one of my friends about the function of music and the musician these days, and that kind of sparked all of this for me and like sparked the idea for this podcast for me. So personally speaking, as a musician, it feels like there hasn't been a vanguard for a very long time. And when I say vanguard, I mean people who are pushing new ideas into the collective, or people who are like solidifying new standards and practices that eventually become culture. I think the last time that I felt that there was new culture being made via music was probably during the 2010s, if I'm being honest. That was the last time that I felt like there was distinct culture that was being formed and crystallized. And that era kind of started, I'd say, in the late 2000s and ended in 2020 with the pandemic. And I just have a lot of memories of the music and the art that was coming out of, so many different places, but New York specifically during that time. It felt just like really alive, really radical and iconic. And it's not because of any particular ideological leanings, but because I feel like the art that was coming out during that time broke down barriers as far as ideas around, who can be a pop star, what kind of music can be popular, what kind of art can be popular. And at the same time, the internet was taking on this role as a cultural curator of sorts. And when I think back on it, I feel like there were two big apex moments as it relates to music that were very significant for that time and just kind of like encapsulated so much of that era of culture and pop culture. And the first one is Lady Gaga, and specifically her album The Fame, but her trilogy, like The Fame Monster, Born This Way. And then the second one is Beyoncé and her Lemonade album. And like, when I think of Beyoncé and her Lemonade album, it's like she didn't invent culture, but that was a signal that the ideas that she was pushing forward through that album had permeated into the mainstream. Like, it wasn't just fringe ideology anymore, like both politically, as far as her, taking a very public stance that was congruent with the leftist progressive trends, like especially about race and racial identity in America, but also artistically, because Lemonade was a genre blending album. It's classified under pop, but before its release, it wouldn't have been. Like, that album solidified the idea that pop can be anything. Like, it didn't invent the idea, but it opened up the category completely, and it changed the way that the collective understood music. And, you know, there would be no Lemonade if there wasn't Lady Gaga, and specifically like the Fame. She's one of the people who changed the game entirely, and she did this in both like social and political contexts, again, because she was very vocal with her activism, especially for LGBTQ rights during a time when literally being gay was like illegal. Like, it's crazy to think about it now, but gay people used to not be able to get married until I think it was 2015 when gay people got the right to marry in America. And I'm pointing to America because that's where like pop culture and like global culture has like incubated and also spread from in the 21st century. But yeah, like they literally, like, gay people didn't have full citizen rights, and Lady Gaga was a supportive of gay rights and gay marriage during this time, and she helped push that into the collective consciousness. And at the same time, she also had a huge artistic impact, because as soon as she stepped on the scene, everybody started copying her, literally, like aesthetically, sonically, everything. Like, she changed the way that pop stars presented themselves, once again opening up this idea of like, who can be a pop star, what kind of music can be popular music. And when I think back to that, I think the Fame, like that first album, was released in 2008, which was literally just a couple months before Barack Obama was elected, because he was elected at the end of 2008, and I think the Fame came like that summer. And so I kind of just like see that, like, starting in like, you know, mid to late 2000s to 2020, that was an era of culture that was sustained like throughout that time. And that was the last time that I really feel that, you know, there was a vanguard. Like, that was the last time that I feel like popular music really delivered thought leaders, or at least engaged with widespread culture in a way that shaped the conversations that people were having, you know. And then 2020, the pandemic hit, and there were all these changes that happened. Like, TikTok became a thing, social media started to undergo an evolution, monoculture died, you know, there was so many like mass economic and labor changes, and just like so many things that happened that changed the world and our relationship with music and art in general. There were all these overlapping convergences of factors that led to where we are now, which is what a lot of people, including myself, you know, sometimes I think this way, but like a lot of people refer to as stuck culture. And I've kind of talked about this before in the song diaries that I did for Lip Sync, but essentially something has happened in music, but also throughout the arts, where we've kind of arrived in this place of cultural stagnancy and what I called mimetic madness, where it's like everything is a rehashing of something that's already been done before, and nothing really sticks in culture as a whole. The world is very similar in a lot of ways to 2008, you know? There haven't been any new movements in architecture, in fashion, in literature. There's a lot of pastiche, but not necessarily anything that's new that's also being mass adopted. And I mean, like, even just looking this year, like, two of the highest grossing tours this year were literally Lady Gaga and Beyoncé, like, you know, the same girls as like almost 20 years ago. It's definitely happening across the board in all art forms, like not just music. It's across all culture and pop culture for sure. But there are some forms that are more insulated than others because of the different methods of consumption, like film, for example. Like, you don't have to listen to an entire album to consume music, but you do have to watch one entire film, like one body of work to consume film. You know what I mean? So anyway, culturally, I felt that we're in this space of limbo, like in this great pause. That's what I'm calling it, the great pause. And it just got me thinking. It's like, well, what is going to come next, you know? And so, you know me, I'm always doing some real like esoteric out of the box research. And through some of this research and through observing what's happening to just our institutions across the board and just tapping into my intuition as well, I'm kind of coming to several different conclusions. And the big conclusion is that the new vanguard is not a person, but rather a feeling. It's actually the act of feeling in and of itself. And I kind of want to break it down and link all these different ideas that I've been thinking of. So I'm going to start from one place and just try to take you guys with me so you can get an idea of like why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking. I'm actually going to start with human design. So there's this theory in human design about a shift that will happen in 2027. Apparently there's this big transit that happens that changes the underlying global background frequency of the world. And also, side note, you don't need to know anything about human design to understand this. It's basically a cultural shift theory that states that we're moving from a cycle of large tribal institutions into a cycle of individuals and self-sovereignty. According to human design, our previous cycles kind of started around the time of the Enlightenment, and it's what built the modern world. It gave us things like, the centralized state, democracy, public health care, organized religion, central banks, major labels, Hollywood, Amazon, Facebook, government programs, like all of these like big, large global institutions. And it gave us the social contract as it exists today. And all of these structures are very intricate, they're very large, and they're very sweeping. And they've acted as the binding force between people globally. The movement of energy was top down. It's like the largest structure that acted upon the individual. Like your life was affected by this larger structure. Now, human design says that beginning in 2027, there's a new cycle coming in where these institutions are basically no longer going to be able to operate in the same way because that underlying frequency is changing. And we're moving into a cycle of the sovereign individual. And it's not that these institutions are going to disappear overnight, because they won't. It's just that they're not going to have the same power over our individual lives as they used to. Energy will be moving out from an individual level to then touch the collective instead of the other way around. So that means each person mutating and evolving according to their own inner compass and authority and, whatever it is that you personally need. And with this shift, innovation for innovation's sake slows down because there's not going to be the energetic frequency to sustain it. The web of structures that pushed new things forward in a global fashion is eroding, and it will continue to erode. And this is part of the reason why we no longer have monoculture. The world has progressed in such a way, largely in part due to specific developments like the internet and algorithms and stuff. But the world has progressed in such a way that literally makes it impossible. And according to a lot of human design teachers and just the research that I was doing, apparently what will happen is that the new will be made from the old. So that means that we'll be remixing and repurposing the past. This repurposing of the past, it's not just copy paste, it's more about finding one's individual connection to what has come before and then communicating that to the outer world and creating your own individual frequency. And one person's frequency then ripples outwards and it creates other connections and it changes the collective. So instead of top down, it's more like inside out. Also, just want to make a note here as I'm editing this that I'm not explicitly endorsing this theory from human design. Anytime I mention anything, just know that, I think of all of these theories and philosophies and spirituality, all this stuff as frameworks for thinking. It doesn't necessarily mean that I 100% believe or agree or whatever. Just making that note for some of you, okay? And personally, I feel like I can already see this happening. For example, when I look at music, labels can't make fetch happen anymore. They just can't. Studios can't make a movie a hit just because you put a lot of money behind it. Politicians can't win elections no matter how much money they raise or how big their campaigns are. If the frequency is not hitting, it's not hitting. Which brings me to mimetic theory and this essay that I read by Catherine D. in Clooney Journal. And I'll put it in the description if you want to read it. But in her essay, she's kind of talking about the cultivation of internet fame and internet clout, which in my opinion, is like really closely tied with modern culture making. And she mentions Renee Girard's essay, Innovation and Repetition. And I'm just going to read a portion of it because I don't want to misquote. So she says, Girard challenges the assumption that true innovation can and should unfold without any link to the past. He details how, historically, innovation was once condemned as a type of heresy, while good cultural forms were expected to remain stable and consistent with long-standing traditions. Over time, as societies shifted and modernity took hold, the meaning of innovation changed. By the modern era, innovation became synonymous with progress, originality, and genius, with people now craving dramatic breaks from tradition. According to Girard, our contemporary culture praises creators who seem to break entirely from what came before, yet true innovation is never ruthless. It's our language that's changed, not the underlying processes of cultural development. Even in internet culture, often described as obsessed with endless, escalating, and even spiritually deleterious novelty, the most viral successes belong to those who recognize, recombine, and re-energize established trends. In fact, online, being too different often works against you. And it's a really good essay. You guys should read it if you're interested in anything around like internet theory. But again, we have this idea of the new no longer, or maybe not ever actually being new, and I see an evolution here where internet culture has become pop culture, of course, and that has become base human culture, and this culture is about reaching into the past, into what has been done before, and finding a way to rehash and remix or present it differently. The innovation and the creation of culture comes from this rehashing. The past is the source material, and of course, there's ways to do this well and there's ways to do this poorly, but at the end of the day, everything is remix. And I don't have any judgments on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's just a thing, it's just what it is. And even just through like talking this out with you guys right now, like I can see my own romantic notions of like the innovator and, the lone genius who's touched by God and just changes the world. Like I can see how all of that is a construct that's been given to me that I've internalized, but it doesn't actually exist, And I can see these fantasies even in my own work and in my way of doing things. And now that I think about it, like maybe this is why I haven't been able to find a manager. Like, oh well, I'm not going to therapy anymore. So, we'll see if that gets resolved. Anyway, I also wanted to connect all of this that I've been talking about to these kind of like semiotic ideas around the world moving towards the symbolic rather than the literate. And this is like a sentiment that I've seen pop up a lot online, and it's something that I've thought about myself and have started experimenting with in my own work, using symbols and images instead of text to convey meaning. And I always see online how the kids don't read anymore. Books don't sell as well. Press doesn't have the same impact. Like the written word doesn't have the same impact that it used to. And what gets proliferated instead is the meme, which is another way of saying the symbol, which is another way of saying the image. And that's part of the reason why aesthetics have become so front and center in industry. And it's also why the line between content, art, and products has been blurred. Like if you want to sell something, it has to look good first and foremost. It has to be shareable because that's the way that information is being consumed and transferred now. And a big part of the reason for that is because of our technologies. And Marshall McLuhan, famous Canadian philosopher, shout out Canada, he talks about this in his book, The Gutenberg Galaxy, where he basically talks about how communication technology shapes the way that we think, which shapes the way that we relate. And in his book, he has this idea of the global village or like global galaxy, which is basically the collection of all human thought and art and work, which arises due to mass communication technology, such as the internet. And he didn't specifically say the internet because his book was published in the 60s. He was more so referring to like TV, film, and radio. But, you know, he kind of cooked with that. Like, he was real prophetic with that. And even though McLuhan's theory is a little different, he talks about this idea of electric images that collapse space and time and dissolve the boundaries between people. And it's crazy because I feel like that's very much related to the human design idea of resonance as the dominant mode of communication, like resonance becoming the dominant mode of communications. There's kind of this overlapping idea of individuals aura farming to then engage in aura to aura communication. And let me just like rewind a little bit here, just to say that like the way that I see it, the internet itself has mutated and it's evolved to where the dominant form of transition is no longer text. You know, it's not words anymore. It's images, it's symbols. And that's why a video platform like TikTok has so much market capture. You know, it's why young teens were able to make careers out of being like memers or like meme bloggers on Instagram and stuff. And I think that this development is partially because images are a lot more resilient than text. You know, text needs context, it needs lots of words, it needs common language, shared culture, a certain level of education, which we all know is in decline. Text needs linear time, and et cetera, et cetera. And none of these things are bad, it's just what it needs. But images and symbols, they don't need all of that. Images are very vibe-based, they're intuitive, they're almost instantaneous. They're actually about feeling first and foremost. It's why we can look at like cave paintings and catch a vibe, you know, even thousands and thousands of years later. And, you know, there's definitely something here about AI and language learning models and why they're able to give the impression of consciousness through text. But I'm actually not even going to get into that right now. Like, maybe I'll save that for another podcast or another voice note, whatever. But back to my point, you know, what I was saying about images. They're like vibe-based, they're intuitive, you know, they're about feeling. Which then brings me to Neville Goddard, and literally his book is called Feeling is the Secret. And if you know anything about the law of assumption, you know that this is like one of the Bibles of the whole thing. And the premise is that our inner state, our feelings, create our outer reality. Feeling is the foundation of all creation. Now, just taking that at face value without going into all of the, you know, the ins and outs of that statement, to me, this is another theory that talks about the shift that's happening in culture. Like the object, that is to say, you know, the song, the film, the painting, the book, whatever, is no longer the point. The feeling that the object elicits is the point. This is why like vibe boards and mood boards are a thing. This is also why the internet has been able to collapse context and authorship and linear time. Those things have kind of become superfluous because we're moving towards a culture that's about the instant transmission of a frequency, of a feeling. And in my opinion, this is also why earnestness is making a big comeback, because satire and ironic detachment, they don't work because they require subtext. You know, it's too many words, too much thinking. And if we're no longer in a world where we make meaning through words, then the thing itself has to be imbued with the meaning that it's trying to convey. Art now spreads not through contextualization or through narratives, but rather through a deep sensing. And that means that resonance matters more than institutions. If your work is true and beautiful, it will proliferate. And I guess what I'm realizing is that I wanted to talk about like being an artist and how to move through these uncertain times and how to understand what's happening culturally. And these are the conclusions that I've come to, which make me feel hopeful about the future, which I think is very important. Like, I'm on that hope frequency for sure. Like, I need it, you know? I need to feel hopeful about art. I think this is also why my music has shifted sonically. Like, I came up in industrial and noise music. You know, I've done that. I've deconstructed the club. I made those records. But if I'm being honest, like the majority of that music came from a really dark place for me. And it also came from a place that was largely like devoid of hope or optimism. And, you know, while I do think there's value in that still, like not everything has to be all fucking happy-go-lucky or anything like that. Like I just personally, like I just know that I can't live like that anymore, you know. Like I need hope, I need a sense of something to look forward to, something to come together about, like some vision of the future that feels worth moving towards. And what makes me feel hopeful is the idea that resonance is real and that it will be a determining factor for what even enters the zeitgeist as we move forward into the 2020s. Like obviously I love writing, I love reading, and I love the written word. And I know it won't disappear completely, like that's not what I'm trying to say, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm okay with losing some text, but I don't want to lose meaning, you know? All I care about is meaning. I want to make sense of the world. And that sense doesn't have to be explicit. It can be intuited and it can be vibes based, but it just has to feel real and true and beautiful. Like, do you get what I mean when I say that? That's honestly, like, that's my whole philosophy. I always just want to make things that are true and beautiful. And I think that it's possible to imbue one's work with these vibes and have that transmitted instantaneously by all who engage with whatever it is that you're doing. And yeah, that's been really long and rambly, but that's pretty much all I wanted to say. I'm out here chilling on a Sunday, just enjoying life today. Don't have many more updates other than that. Oh yeah, I'm going on tour. I'm going on tour starting in September throughout October and November. I'm coming to Europe and the USA. So if you want to see me live, just go to debbiefriday.com/tour. You know what to do. Get your tickets. And yeah, I'm going to try to like make more of these voice notes, more of these like podcast episodes for you guys. Like I'm really enjoying this. I'm enjoying talking about these ideas and kind of getting this stuff out of my head and into a more concrete form. I'm also open to hearing other ideas. Like if you agree, disagree, you have something to add, something to subtract, whatever, like drop a comment or DM me, anything. All right, that's pretty much all I wanted to say. So yeah, love you guys. Bye.